On a random weeknight, you notice something small and oddly specific. Your phone is quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind where you feel rested and centered and grateful. It's a quieter quiet. The kind that makes you check your screen, even though you already know there's nothing there. You open an app, close it, open another one, like you're walking from room to room in your own mind. And maybe what bothers you isn't that nobody's calling, it's that you expected someone would. Not because you need constant attention, but because for a long time, noise was proof you still belonged somewhere, so when the noise drops, your brain tries to solve it like a problem. Did I do something? Did they forget me? Did I fall off the map? Is this what getting left behind feels like? It's a weird emotional mix. You feel left out, and yet you also feel less pulled, less tangled, like you can finally hear yourself think. And that makes you nervous. Because solitude has two faces. One looks like rejection, the other looks like repositioning, and those two can feel identical at first. There are growth phases that don't look like winning. They look socially quiet. They look like fewer invitations, shorter conversations, less checking in, less effort from people you used to assume would always be there. It can feel like you got pushed out of a room and nobody noticed. But sometimes what's actually happening is that you're not matching the room anymore. Not because you're better than anyone, not because you're too evolved, just because your inner standards shifted. And now the old rhythm feels off. The jokes land differently. The topics feel repetitive. The energy feels like chewing the same piece of gum you stopped tasting an hour ago. You might still love those people. You might still appreciate what they were to you, but you can feel something inside you getting tired. Not angry, tired, like your nervous system is quietly voting no to the same cycle. At first, this detachment starts internally. It's almost invisible. You still show up. You still smile. You still reply. But your presence isn't fused anymore. You're there, and a part of you is watching from a little distance, noticing what you used to ignore. You notice how often you're shrinking to fit the conversation. You notice how often you're performing a version of yourself that keeps things easy. You notice the subtle pressure to stay the same so nobody feels uncomfortable. And that's when social chemistry changes without anyone having to fight. It's not always dramatic conflict. It's more like a temperature shift. People who used to feel close suddenly feel like they're standing slightly farther away. You can't point to one betrayal. There's no villain, just a subtle mismatch. You might go to dinner and realize you've been nodding for 10 minutes and you don't actually agree with anything being said. Or you might catch yourself laughing at something that used to be funny and now just feels thin. Or it's a work thing. You're in a meeting and everyone is using the same buzzwords and the same tone of urgency, and you can feel your body tightening, not because you're overwhelmed, but because you're not buying it anymore. You're watching people treat stress like it's a personality trait, and some part of you is done living like that. And then you go home, and the quiet hits again. And your mind interprets it as failure, because that's what the ego does. When your outer world gets quieter, the ego doesn't say, we're recalibrating. It says, we're disappearing. The ego is the part of you that measures worth by feedback, by being included, by being remembered, by being wanted. So if invitations slow down, it panics. If group chats go silent, it assumes you've been replaced. If you're not being validated, it starts to whisper that you're irrelevant. Not because it's evil, because it thinks validation equals safety. That's why quiet seasons can feel humiliating. You're not just alone. You're alone without proof that it's temporary, without applause, without a clear storyline that makes it feel purposeful. And comparison gets louder in the quiet. You scroll and see other people posting dinners, celebrations, new jobs, engagement photos, new apartments, trips, upgrades. You see proof of movement, proof of belonging, proof that life is happening. Meanwhile, your life looks still. and the ego takes that stillness personally. It says, everyone's moving, and you're stuck. But here's what almost nobody wants to admit. Momentum often follows stillness, not as a guarantee, as a pattern. Think about how direction actually forms, not the fantasy version, where you wake up with a perfect plan and a clear feeling of certainty. Real direction forms under the surface. Decisions form in places you can't post about. Clarity forms while you're washing dishes, walking alone, staring out a window, waking up at 3 a.m. with your chest tight and your mind trying to negotiate with a life you've outgrown. There's a reason the mind needs less noise before something real can grow. Noise keeps you reactive. It keeps you performing. It keeps you busy enough to avoid deeper questions. Noise gives you little hits of belonging that can delay necessary change. And silence does the opposite. Silence removes your distractions. It makes the internal landscape louder. Not because something is wrong, but because you can finally hear what's been there. Your nervous system doesn't just process danger. It processes meaning. It decides what matters. And when you're constantly surrounded by other people's expectations, emotions, crises, and opinions, your system stays in a kind of social survival mode. You're reading faces, you're managing tone, you're adjusting, you're scanning for approval or threat. Solitude reduces that scanning. It lets your system come down, not instantly. Sometimes it spikes first because quiet feels like vulnerability. But over time, solitude can be stabilizing. It can be a reset, a recalibration. And this is important. Emotional withdrawal is not always depression. Depression is heavy and flattening. And if that's what someone is experiencing, it deserves care and support, not romantic language. But there is another experience that can look similar from the outside and feel very different on the inside. It's a kind of withdrawal that's actually your system protecting a new phase. You're not withdrawing because you can't handle life. You're withdrawing because you can't handle more noise, while something inside you is trying to reorganize. It's like your inner world is under renovation. You don't invite people over while you're tearing down walls, so your environment stops matching your identity and isolation begins. Not because you were rejected, but because your inner standards rose. And when inner standards rise, the old spaces can start to feel smaller. Not because those spaces are objectively bad, because you changed shape. You might notice it when you visit a place you used to love. Same bar, same friends, same music. And you're there, and you can't find the feeling you used to get. It's like trying to slide back into a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. Or you notice it in your habits. Things that used to soothe you stop working. The doom scrolling feels emptier. The late night distractions feel more irritating. The quick dopamine fixes don't scratch the itch anymore. They just leave a weird aftertaste. That can feel like loss. And it is a kind of loss. You lose what you thought you needed. You lose roles. The one who always says yes. The one who keeps everyone together. The one who never needs anything. The one who can handle it, the one who is always available. You lose status, maybe not outward status, but internal status. The sense that you're doing life correctly, the feeling that your identity is stable because other people recognize it. You lose certainty, and certainty is a big one. People cling to certainty because it makes the future feel controllable. When certainty dissolves, it feels like free-falling. But loss forces internal self-reliance in a way comfort never does. When you can't lean on old roles, you have to meet yourself directly. When you can't lean on constant feedback, you have to develop internal standards. When you can't lean on familiar environments, you have to decide what actually fits. And detachment begins to look less like abandonment and more like relief. At first, it's a relief you don't fully trust. It feels suspicious, like, why does it feel good that I'm not being pulled into the same loops? Why does it feel good that the invitations slow down? Why does it feel good to have fewer people demanding my attention? Because beneath the loneliness, there's often a quieter truth. Not everything is meant for the next chapter. Some relationships fade without conflict because they were held together by an older version of you, a version that needed constant reassurance, or needed to be needed, or needed to stay agreeable, or needed to keep the peace at any cost. When you stop feeding that dynamic, it doesn't always explode. Sometimes it just doesn't have fuel. Habits lose emotional charge. You don't crave the same escapes. You don't feel pulled toward the same drama. You don't get the same high from being in the middle of everything. And that's confusing because the old you thought those things were you. But they weren't you. They were strategies. And strategies change when identity changes. This is the part where the ego gets extra loud because it hates the feeling of fading. It hates being in a season where you can't prove yourself. It hates being in the middle, where you're not the old you, but not fully the new you. So it interprets isolation as failure. It whispers, "You're being forgotten." It whispers, "You're missing out." It whispers, "You should go back before it's too late." That's why the temptation to return to old circles can become intense during quiet seasons. Not because those circles are your destiny, but because familiarity feels like safety, even if it's draining, even if it's small, even if it keeps you stuck. Loneliness can mask growth. That's one of the cruel tricks of transition. Your internal world is stabilizing, your standards are rising, your identity is becoming more honest, and your emotional experience is, "I'm alone." But the discomfort isn't always about being alone. Sometimes it's about losing the old identity that needed validation. That's the real grief. Not just fewer people, fewer mirrors. Because when you're constantly surrounded by people, you're constantly being reflected. You get feedback, you get roles, you get expectations, you get little cues that tell you who to be. Solitude removes those cues. And in that absence, you have to decide who you are without applause, which is exactly why solitude builds the version that can leap. There's a kind of strength that only forms when nobody is clapping, when nobody is watching, when nobody is confirming you in real time. It's not glamorous, it's quiet and repetitive. It's choosing the honest thing when the old performance would get more approval. It's holding your standards when nobody else is asking you to. It's staying with your own discomfort without needing someone to rescue you from it. And if you've ever watched how acceleration happens in real life, not motivational speeches, real life, you'll notice something. Often there's a pullback before forward motion. Athletes do it without thinking. Before a jump, there's a dip. Before a sprint, there's a set. Before release, there's tension. Psychologically, it can look similar. The pullback can look like withdrawal. Fewer social ties, less noise, less outward activity, more inward processing. That doesn't mean you're regressing. It can mean you're gathering force. The pause before acceleration is often the runway before takeoff. But runways aren't exciting. They're long and flat, and from the outside, nothing is happening. You're just rolling, building speed, building alignment, building direction. Reflection strengthens direction. Decisions form beneath silence. You might not even notice it at first. It might show up as a simple refusal. You stop replying to certain conversations the way you used to. You stop laughing at things you don't find funny anymore. You stop volunteering for dynamics that drain you. You stop trying to explain yourself to people who only understand the old version of you. You become less available to noise and more available to truth. That can feel like isolation. And it can also feel like the first time you've had real space to breathe. There's a particular kind of quiet authority that grows in solitude. Not arrogance, not coldness, authority. It's the feeling of, I can live from the inside out. It's the ability to make choices without immediate social reinforcement, to tolerate not being understood, to tolerate being temporarily invisible while you rebuild. Because the next level, whatever that means in your life, more aligned work, healthier relationships, clearer direction, better boundaries, deeper peace, it requires independence. It requires clarity. It requires self-trust. And those don't form in the middle of constant distraction. So yes, fewer invitations can mean deeper alignment. Not always. Sometimes people pull away because they're busy, or because life shifts, or because relationships simply change. But if you're noticing a pattern where your inner world is changing and your outer world is getting quieter, it may not be exclusion. It may be preparation. Preparation isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it feels like being removed from the crowd and left alone with your own thoughts. And at first, your mind will interpret that as danger. But beneath that discomfort, there can be a hidden relief. The relief of not needing to perform. The relief of not needing to be on. The relief of not being pulled into patterns that keep you small. You might even notice that certain relationships fade without conflict, and instead of devastation, you feel something softer, a quiet exhale, like your body knew this was coming before your mind did. You're being detached from what can't come with you. That's a painful sentence because it touches grief. People don't like losing connections, even unhealthy ones, even misaligned ones, even draining ones. Loss still hurts, but detachment isn't always a punishment. It can be a filtering, a natural sorting. Some people were meant to walk with an earlier version of you. Some spaces were meant to hold you while you were learning certain lessons. Some habits were meant to protect you when you didn't have better tools yet. And now, your system is changing tools. That's why environments can start feeling smaller, not because they're inferior, because you can't fit the same way without compressing yourself. And compressing yourself starts to feel expensive. So you step back, or life steps back, or both. And in the quiet, you notice something else. Calm can feel unfamiliar. If your nervous system is used to constant stimulation, constant social checking, constant problem solving, constant emotional negotiation, calm can feel like emptiness. The mind will try to refill it. It will reach for old noise, old people, old circles, old distractions. But if you can tolerate the calm long enough, it becomes something else. It becomes steadiness. It becomes internal authority. It becomes the ability to hold your own center, even when the world isn't reflecting you back. This is where a gentle micro-practice can help, not as a fix, but as an anchor. When you notice the urge to chase noise, when you feel that impulse to message someone you don't even miss, just to feel connected, or to scroll endlessly just to feel occupied, you might try pausing for a minute and naming what's actually happening inside you, not with judgment, with curiosity. It can help to put your phone down, place a hand somewhere you can feel your body, and take a few slow breaths. Slow enough that your system gets the message. Nothing is chasing you right now. Then you might quietly ask yourself, am I reaching for connection, or am I reaching for validation? You don't have to answer perfectly. You don't have to force a conclusion. The point is to notice, because noticing creates space, and space is where new identity forms. Another thing that can help is choosing one small action each day that aligns with your internal standards, even if nobody sees it. Not a dramatic reinvention, something almost unimpressive. A small boundary, a small act of honesty, a small moment of choosing rest, a small moment of not reacting, a small moment of not explaining yourself into exhaustion. Self-trust doesn't rebuild through big declarations. It rebuilds through small follow-through. And in the middle of all of this, there's one paradox worth holding on to, just one, because it tends to be true. The quieter the season, the louder the becoming. You're growing without constant feedback. You're acting without applause. You're learning to trust internal standards over external noise. That's what solitude builds. And if you're in a season where life feels socially quiet, where your environment doesn't match you the way it used to, where your mind keeps trying to interpret the quiet as rejection, this can be a different way to see it. Not superstition, not magical thinking, not a promise that everything is about to explode into perfection, just a grounded recognition. Transitions often require separation. Sometimes you can't hear your own mind until the room empties. Sometimes you can't feel your own values until the old incentives disappear. Sometimes you can't meet your own strength until nobody is watching you perform strength. Isolation can feel like rejection, and it can also be repositioning. And if the quiet has been following you lately, if the crowd feels farther away, if old conversations feel draining, if familiar spaces feel smaller, if your nervous system is asking for less noise, there's a chance this isn't life closing on you. It may be life giving you runway. Runway isn't glamorous. It's long. It's flat. It can feel lonely. But it's also where speed is built, and the version of you that can actually leap into clearer work, healthier love, deeper peace, more honest living is usually built here. In the unphotographed season, in the quiet season, in the season where you learn to stand without constant reinforcement. Not because you don't need people, because you're learning not to need noise to feel real. And when that shift happens, the quiet stops feeling like exile. It starts feeling like space. Space where your next chapter can actually fit.